Welcome students to the EPG Pathshala. I am very happy to share my thoughts with you on the topic of women in political governance. I am Dr. Sarla Gopalan, formerly Secretary to Government of India in the Ministry of Human Resource Development, Department of Women and Child. I am going to discuss with you today the historical events that paved the way for women's political participation in India and where they stand with regard to political participation today, how much they are able to influence decisions in the government, in the parliament and legislatures, and in the local bodies, as also other corporate institutions. It is very important that women participate in decision making in order to achieve their empowerment at the local, state, national level, and that is the importance of the discussion today and the historical way in which this has developed. India boasts of a very rich heritage of knowledge, equality, high erudition and practice of non-discrimination in the very ancient ages. But later, in the centuries that followed, for variety of reasons, these things deteriorated and the equality between the sexes, that is men and women, equality for all groups of people, got misinterpreted, and therefore the situation changed, causing a lot of discrimination and inequality. We have had historically various external forces influencing the history of India, the invasions by the Mughals and the rise and spread of the Islamic religion, then the British occupation of India, the East India Company's administration, and then the influence of the British government and the practices in Britain and other European countries. Thereafter, the coming into being of the League of Nations and the United Nations after the First World War and the Second World War, and the present emphasis on democratic societies with justice, equality, liberty to all, and the predominance of democratic values. We have to look at our history of the development in this area of women's political participation in governance, compare it with what happened globally and how India responded to various factors, and where we have reached today with women having equal status constitutionally, legally, but I would say not socially, because cultural mindsets have not changed. The cultural mindset was a very, very important factor which had suppressed women and given them no justice. And the social reformers in the 18th, 19th centuries, in fact most of them men, fought for social reforms whereby they wanted a lot of discrimination and suppression of women to be changed. The social practices had confined women to the inside of the home and did not give her any position in the public arena. She also was not given a voice even within the home, because she did not have any entitlements. She did not have right to property. She had to depend completely on the male of the family for her sustenance, care. This did not matter as long as there was a principle of equity followed by the families, and the male members gave respect and looked after the women carefully, with respect and with lot of care. But this did not happen all the time in all the cultures. In fact, they started harassing women, and then a woman who lost her husband could not even live. Her body was burnt when the husband's body was cremated, and this was called the practice of sati. So the social reformers fought very vehemently against this practice of sati, and it continued for quite some centuries, even though even though the wife burning, at that time it was wife burning, because the wife did not live after the husband's death. They buried her, they burnt her body along with the man's body. Anyway, this practice was put to an end with the vehement battle fought by the social reformers like Rajaram Mohan Roy and others. In fact, we have the last case of a wife being burnt in as late as 1988-89, when Roop Kanwar was burnt along with her a dead husband. She was a graduate. She was only 20 odd years old, but then that family in Rajasthan thought it proper that this should be done, and this was a very, very serious factor and a dent on the principle that India upheld of equality and care for its women. Therefore, sati was abolished, and the women's movement carried on the social reform to change the mindset of the people. The other issue on which the social reformers fought through the centuries was on education of women, because they were not given access to education, and also they were, of course, property they could not do unless the laws changed, which took a very long time. They did not have a share in the property of the household. The father gave his property to the sons because it was patriarchal principles that were followed, and the girl on marriage was not given any title to any of the immovable properties like land, etc., because she was going away from this home, father's home, to her husband's home, and it was, they thought, not practical to give her a share in the landed property, because there would be clash between the families, the natal family of the girl and the family of her husband, to which she moved after marriage. But then she was entitled to get some of the immovable property, particularly jewelry, etc., and slowly this, it was earlier Stridan, and she got few entitlements in terms of immovable property for her to take with her when she got married. But in course of time, this took the shape of dowry, and when it took the shape of dowry, which is persisting even now, there have been a lot of calamities. However, as part of the social reform, what happened was the laws were changed, and then she got an entitlement. The Hindu Code Bill was changed and Hindu Succession Act was changed, and therefore she got entitlement in the father's property. She was to get equal share with her brothers in the property of the father. This was a very big change in social terms and in legislative terms for India, and we have to thank all the reformers and the movements that have taken place in India for bringing this legal equality of women with men. It was so many centuries, so many decades of fighting that women got some space in the public arena. Though the women's movement started right in the beginning of the 20th century and the women fought along with the men during the freedom struggle, yet women did not have even the right to vote. In 1917, Dr. Sarojini Naidu led a group of women to the British Parliament demanding that women be given the right to vote. So in 1921, there was a small improvement in that a small section of the women got the right to vote, provided they were married wives, they were educated, and they had some property. So persons who were not married, persons who did not own property, persons who were not educated, women, they could not vote. But the women agitated, and in 1921, the National Congress brought out a Reforms Act in which they shed the condition that only married women could vote. They said educated women as well as those who had entitlement to property could vote. But the agitation was on to get women equal rights in voting, and this happened only in 1950 when the Constitution of India was promulgated. In fact, we always say that in Britain, after a lot of struggle in the suffragist movement, women got the right to vote in the 1930s, which is the time when in India, women with education and property also got the right. But then finally, it was in 1950 when the Indian Constitution was written and promulgated that universal adult franchise was introduced, and without any discrimination of sex, religion, caste, location, everybody got equal rights and also right to vote. In fact, this is a very, very significant historical step in bringing the women out of their homes into public spaces and giving them a right in decision making in the nation. Because the biggest decision you make is electing the persons you want to govern. Therefore, this vote, the right to vote, is a very, very precious right. And with women getting that right, they became equal partners in decision making in the nation, and that has been heralded as a very big step. If we look at our neighboring countries in the world, Kuwait got this right for women to vote only recently. Until then, women did not have the right to vote. There were many other countries where women did not have the right to vote even after India declared universal adult franchise. Condition was women had to be 21 years and above. Women, though having got the right, were not fully participating in electing their leaders. We saw in the whole bunch of general elections that have taken place right from 1952 onwards that while 60% and more of the men voted, less than 50% of women voted. There was a big gap between the proportion of men voting and the proportion of women voting. Very, very slowly, the gap between the proportion of men and women has been coming down, and now it has come down to around 8 to 9%. If 64% of men vote, 56% of women are also voting. But what has happened in this period is the significance of the women's vote. So, political leaders have understood the value of women's vote, and they cajole the constituency of women to get votes and do things which the women are demanding, not fully but to some extent. So at least they make promises so that the women will vote for their party. Anyway, what we have to see is that every woman exercises her right to vote and get the right kind of leader whom she would like to be in governance to dispense authority and implement all the legislation and all the development activities that are required for the improvement of the nation. Therefore, the voting right is very, very important. If I must give you a very concrete example, it was the Chief Minister M.G. Ramachandran of Tamil Nadu who realized the value of the women's vote. So, in his campaign, he specially pleaded to women, and the party gave a lot of gifts like saris and other facilities to women, and got a good proportion of vote from the women voters, which got him the majority, and of course he was Chief Minister of Tamil Nadu for several terms. Now everybody else has understood this. The next part of governance is becoming a member of the bodies which take the decisions. If we look at membership of women in parliament and in the legislature, even till date, they are just less than 11%. Of course, in 1952, it was just 4% women. And these 4% women were invariably from the richer families, elite of the society. Only they got opportunity to contest and come into positions. Over the years, this has slightly changed, and a lot of social activists, workers, teachers, educated people, and even less educated people, but if they are important in the community, they have been able to win elections. And last election, the 16th general election, 11% of women were elected to the parliament. Now, to be elected to the parliament, you have got to be made a candidate. So, the political parties have to give women candidature. What we have seen is the political parties are very wary of giving candidature to women because they think they will lose and their party will lose a position. So, they will give only such constituencies which they are very sure will be won because the party has dominance there. Otherwise, they do not want to risk giving it to a lady, and therefore only winnable constituencies are given. Or in order to show on record that they have given candidature to women, they will give such constituencies which in any case they will not win, so that they will not lose the proportion of candidates from their political party in the legislature or in the parliament. This is the trend we have seen. Therefore, women have been agitating, and this is a global agitation, that there must be reservation for women, and our constitution provides for that affirmative action, because for so many centuries there has been social neglect. Therefore, there must be affirmative action, so that you prescribe that there will be a quota for women and that many women will come into the parliament, and that has been decided at the United Nations as to be around 33%. We have the example of the Scandinavian countries like Norway, which has more than 40% as women. I mean, there is no reservation, but the community votes that way. 40% plus are women members, and sometimes there are more women members than even men. And in African countries, for instance, Uganda has 50% women representing. Even our neighboring countries like Nepal have 30%, Bangladesh and Pakistan have more than 15 and 20% of women represented in the parliament. But in India, as I mentioned to you, even in the last election, we are only 11%. And when we come down to the state legislature, it's even 6% and below. Therefore, women are agitating and fighting for bringing a constitutional amendment. The process of bringing an amendment started in 1996. It came as the 81st Amendment, but then it was not deliberated upon because men said only highly qualified and elite women will come, and they said no, there must be reservation according to backward class, and of course scheduled class was already built in, but they said there must be reservation for backward class, and by some pretext they have not been agreeing, and so with every parliament term being over, the constitution amendment bill was lapsing. Now last it was thought that if the bill is introduced in the Rajya Sabha, then it will not lapse, because Rajya Sabha continues all the time, because 1/3 of the persons are elected every 6 years, and therefore there is no end to the large Rajya Sabha, because 2/3 members continue all the time, and therefore now this bill for introducing a quota for women up to 33% is now in the Rajya Sabha, and it will not lapse. So whenever our legislators change their mindset and feel like getting women into the parliament and the legislatures, they can make the constitution amendment to bring women in. So there was another suggestion that if the political parties could increase the number of women candidates in their political parties, that will increase the number of women. But we find that that has not been done. However, if you look at the number of candidates posed by the political parties and the number of those candidates who have won, the winnability of women candidates has been higher than the winnability of men candidates as a proportion of the men who contested or the women who contested and who won. Therefore, there is a good chance. Particularly now with the 1993 amendment of the constitution to give a quota for women in the local bodies, in the panchayat and corporations and municipalities. Large number of women have got trained in administration and in holding political offices. There are almost 1 million, 10 lakhs of women have been members since 1993 in the various panchayats and local bodies, and that has given them lot of experience to be in governance, and they have shown, not all but many have shown excellent performance. Yet there are some who are dominated by their men and they call themselves Adhyakshapatis, or the husbands of the elected presidents. Anyway, this will take a lot of time to change, but the good part of it is that it is changing, and we have evidence of excellent performance by a good proportion of women who are holding these positions. The same kind of leadership also been discussed by the women's movement, and they said in all the corporate, commercial bodies, corporations, banks, there must be women in leadership positions. Only if women are in leadership positions, there can be a concern for women issues. Women workers are there, women's interests are there as consumers, as citizens, as members of the community. And a lot of women's requirements and needs are different from men's requirements and needs. For instance, say time of work. Like if the woman has to take care of the child and also work, she needs some accommodation, some change in that. And therefore a lot of things are happening, and now today we can boast of having a very good proportion of women on the governing bodies of the public sector organizations, few of the private organizations. Of course, we always boasted that India had Indira Gandhi as the Prime Minister, and then of course at that time there was also Prime Minister in Bangladesh subsequently, and then Pakistan had Mrs. Bhutto. But these were very lone examples. The general mass of women did not come up to any kind of leadership positions. But today carefully that is being worked out, and you have many chairpersons of banks as women. You have very many members, board directors on the board of corporate bodies as women. we are looking, in fact, a lot of special effort was taken to bring women as vice chancellors, as heads of departments. Of course, in the government, they do come up as secretaries to government and in high decision making positions. But in the colleges, with lot of effort and training, and the women also have got to be willing to come up and take these leadership positions, which involves a lot of responsibility and dedication of time, hard work. Sometimes they have to travel further distances, but they are also being educated on this, and a large number of women have come into positions of leadership and heading organizations like universities, colleges, departments of the government, various public sector and private sector organizations, and they are getting lead. To summarize, I have to say that women in India fighting first to get franchise to vote have scaled many heights. They, along with the introduction of the promulgation of the Constitution of India in 1950, they got adult franchise and they could vote. Thereafter, continuously in every election, they have been made candidates, and from 4% in the first parliament, they have now come up to 11%, but they have still to make at least 33% of membership in the legislatures so as to become a very dominant voice in the lawmaking bodies. They have also got to make their presence in all decision making bodies, and in the panchayats it has been made possible with the constitution amendment and giving reservation of 30% of the seats and now 50% for women members, and they are also 30 to 50% presidents of the local bodies. And then efforts have been made to give them positions on the boards of companies, that is corporate institutions, in public sector institutions where chairpersons of banks and other corporate bodies are women, so that the decision of the women, the viewpoint of the women can come into being and that can be asserted. And therefore, in order to help women assume these positions, it is important to give them good leadership training. So, leadership training for somebody to become the next level of higher position. Say a clerk should become a section officer, a section officer should become a secretary, deputy secretary. Similarly, in colleges, lecturers have to become heads of departments. Heads of departments should become principals, deans, and also vice chancellors. These things are happening, but very intensive action to give them the training to take up these leadership positions is necessary at every level, starting from the grassroots till the parliament. Thank you.